I'm going to change into a sweater. Hello, fall is here, and that means it's time to read some dark, disturbing, messed up books. I have two books that I'm going to read today. Foundational texts, I think, for transgressive fiction. We have this book by Dennis Cooper that I'm not going to say the name of quite yet because I fear the YouTube overlords. And then we have Geek Love by Katherine Dunn, which is the book I'm starting with and I'm going to tell you about right now. I'm only halfway through, but I'm just feeling so excited about this book and so wrapped up in the world of Geek Love that I feel like I need to talk about it before I finish it. So Geek Love follows a circus family. It begins with the father sitting down his children who obviously admire him and telling them a story that they've heard many times of how he met their mother. How he had inherited his father's circus after his father died, and it was kind of dying, and then him and this woman, Lillian, the children's mother, decided that they wanted to create their own freak show. Create children who, just through their own bodies, could make money for them. He did this through drugging her while she was pregnant, and she was fully on board. Their first surviving experiment is the oldest brother, Artie. He's born with flippers attached at his shoulders and hips, and he does the show of like the Aqua Boy. The next children are twins, conjoined twins, Iffy and Ellie. Then came the narrator, Ollie, who was born with albinism and dwarfism. Ollie isn't quite enough of a freak to have a show of her own, and she always feels like a failure because of that. When Ollie is around 6, the youngest child, Chick, is born, and at first he seems like a totally average kid, what they call a norm, but just as they're about to abandon him for being a norm, right outside the gas station, he reveals his gift, the most powerful gift. Then the book cuts to now, the present day, when Ollie is 38 years old. In the present, Ollie is living in an apartment building with her mother, Lily, acting as like the manager of the apartment. She collects the rent and she delivers mail and she takes calls for the people who live here. She doesn't know that her daughter Ollie is living here because she's blind and deaf. Another person living in this apartment building is Ollie's daughter, Miranda. Again, she doesn't know Ollie's relationship to her and doesn't know that Ollie is following her around. Though it's kind of strange because Ollie's following her around without the intention of talking to her, where Miranda really wants to get to know Ollie because Miranda creates art for medical textbooks and she wants to draw Ollie. I said it was fall, but it's too hot to be wearing this sweater in this room. I'm going to try to open the window. I hope it's not too loud. So Miranda is an art student, but she also works dancing at this club, and Ollie has followed her to work before. And it's kind of like this burlesque show, but it's a show of freaks. And Miranda, while outwardly norm, has a tail. After like 3 years of managing to avoid Miranda's badgering in the hallways, she comes to Ollie's work and says, I'm taking you out for lunch, and then I'm going to draw you, and we're going to talk. I need to talk to you. And Ollie is first stricken with panic, thinking that she's been caught, that Miranda somehow knows that Ollie is her mother. But she soon finds out that what Miranda wants to talk about is Miss Lick, a woman who likes to change people and goes to Miranda's work to offer them money to be changed, for Miranda to have her tail removed. Miranda wants to talk to Ollie because she's very conflicted about this. She's always hated her tail, and now she kind of likes it, now that she's been able to use it for her job. Hearing this, Ollie remembers when she was forced to give Miranda up to the nuns because she wasn't enough of a freak, and telling the nuns that they weren't allowed to remove her tail. She would go check in on Miranda every couple of years, and the nuns would say she wants it gone so badly, she hates it, and Ollie would refuse. And Ollie really hates hearing from Miranda how much this tail that Ollie had forced her to keep has given her trouble. But when Miranda asks, would you take a procedure that would make you normal? Ollie says, no. I've spent my whole life wishing that I was more abnormal, that I was more freakish. And Miranda can't really understand that. Miranda ends up deciding to get this procedure done, and that enrages Ollie, who thinks that she doesn't understand the significance and value of her tail. Part 2 then goes back in time to Ollie's childhood. It starts with her father being this kind of abusive teacher, training Ollie to be an announcer for the circus, because again, she's not freakish enough to have her own show like her siblings have. Ollie says that at the time she liked speaking, but she didn't like reading, though despite that, she acted as the page turner for her older brother Artie, who loved to read horror stories. And Ollie asks him, why do you like reading these? Like, don't they scare you? And he says, no. The objects of fear in these horror stories are us, Ollie. Artie is just the most interesting character. He's this intelligent, like, very typical boss of an eldest sibling. He has all this control where physically he has very little. He needs a lot of assistance to do pretty much anything physical. He's brash and abrasive and potty-mouthed, and Ollie defers to him for absolutely everything and loves serving him. We meet the twins, who Ollie admits that she never knew quite as well as she knew Artie because the two of them only needed each other. We see Iffy as more tender and Ellie as more wary of anyone who might threaten her connection to her twin sister. Here we also see the mom Lily's obsession with this trailer that they charge admission to, which holds in formaldehyde-filled jars all of the failed experiments of children, all of the stillbirths, and then 2 deaths, 2 children who were suffocated as babies from pillows falling on their faces. Then we get a story of Lily and all her children going to the supermarket together, and a man in a car in the parking lot trying to shoot them all to death. We see here the paramedics and the doctors' disgust and fear of these children and how isolated they have to be. We also see so much complexity here. Like, a witness tells the man who tried to kill them that he did the right thing, that that woman was pregnant again. And it's so nuanced because, like, absolutely, that is unjust craziness to just shoot this family that we have now got to know and like understand the personalities of. But then at the same time, the parents are creating disabled children, but then at the same time, their disabilities aren't points of like conflict for them. Like I said, they want to be more freakish. But then, of course, they've been raised to think that because that gets more money for their parents. It's just like, it's so much to think about. Then we get to see the whole story behind Chick's birth and almost abandonment and then revealing of his powers. They're going to drop him off at a gas station, but he wakes up and he's hungry, and Lily says, I have to feed him first. But the dad, Al, who's very controlling, he says, no, we're doing it my way. We're dropping him off right now. And as Lily is taking this box with the baby in it outside, she is lifted into the air. The pins come out of her hair, and then she's like thrown back into the basket with her breast in the baby's mouth. He is telekinetic, which seems a little bit silly and a little bit crazy and a little bit too much, but it's perfect. And the way visually that Katherine Dunn does this telekinesis is beautiful. This book is playing out like a movie in my head. With Chick, it starts out in this family as fear of his capabilities. He is a newborn, and he is so incredibly powerful and doesn't know how to use his powers. For many months, they keep him basically in a cage to protect him and themselves. There's also a major issue with Artie here that really only Ollie sees because she does know him best. Artie has kind of adopted their father's drive and desire for money, but he's internalized it. And instead, he's become this child who wants to be the best and who is very jealous. And he sees Chick's potential. Like, for example, at 10 years old, Artie would pretend to drown himself if his twin sister's show outsold his. He does talk to Ollie about how he kind of has to make himself special, that the twins could just sit on a bench and people would be pleased with that, but that he strikes this specific like discomfort in people that he needs to overcome but then also play into. He's a very, very, very smart child. And Katherine Dunn is saying very interesting things about disability through him. Artie becomes this like seething little ball of rage. He is so jealous of Chick that when Chick is left alone, he tries to suffocate him with a pillow. It becomes quickly obvious that this was the fate that the child before Ollie, who's one of the formaldehyde babies, was met with. Of course, he doesn't succeed in killing the telekinesis baby, who throws him to the side and like gives him a very bad concussion, fractured skull. And for a second, it seems like Artie is dead. And this is devastating because even though he has just tried to kill a baby, Artie is so fucking fascinating and well-developed. And it does tell you in the part of the book that takes place when Ollie is 38 that Artie is no longer alive then. And I am just hoping that he lasts for most of the book because I am so interested in him. Once Chick is a toddler, the first thing that they do is use his powers to pickpocket. Him and Al, the father, go on these little pickpocketing trips until one time they're caught. And Al has no idea how or why he's been caught. But Ollie does, because Ollie took Artie to the telephone booth and he made a phone call. There is also a little bit of jealousy here with Chick being an outwardly average child, that they know that their dad loves how inconspicuously he can move through the world with Chick, not something that he can do with his other children. As Chick grows older and develops more of a personality, he unintentionally becomes Ollie's biggest rival, because like Ollie, all he wants in the world is to be loved, and the best way of doing that, he finds out as Ollie has, is to serve people, which is much easier for him because he is able-bodied and telekinetic. Like, he does the craziest shit. He cleans Artie's Aqua Boy a tank for his act by taking out every cell that shouldn't be there until the water is so clear you can basically see straight through the tank like nothing is there. Despite this, Artie passionately hates this child. This child who is a very sweet and sensitive and caring little boy. When the pickpocketing falls through, they start on gambling, with Chick sitting in a hotel room near the casino cheating. He is so powerful, I cannot even describe it to you. Then one day, the money goes missing from the safe, the circus safe. Nobody knows what's going on. Chick and Al go on another casino gambling cheating trip, and here they are caught by this organization. These men show up at the hotel, and they almost kill Chick by drowning him in the bathtub to threaten Al with what will happen if he ever tries gambling again. This was all organized by Artie, using the money from the safe to pay out these men. Ollie's devastated by this because she didn't know anything. The phone calls that Artie made, he made with the help of someone else. The organizing that he did, she wasn't a part of. She didn't flip the pages in his horror stories anymore. So even though Chick is very powerful and has a lot of potential, the family doesn't know quite what to do with him in terms of like the circus, because they obviously can't just like show off his telekinetic ability to everyone. As Artie says, the army will whisk him away immediately. Chick develops this really intense relationship with meat. He becomes vegetarian and he won't handle meat after he watches one of the circus performers fall from a great height. And he knows that he could have saved her, but he was afraid of getting in trouble for moving a human body. Artie knows that Chick doesn't like touching meat specifically with his telekinetic abilities because the meat like communicates with him in a way and tells him about how it used to be alive. And Artie, of course, makes Chick touch meat whenever he can, and Chick knows that Artie is being a bully, but still does it for him. In the circus, Artie is becoming more and more powerful. He is clearly the most intelligent person here, no matter how intelligent their father thinks that he is. Artie brings in a doctor, which kind of is just a way of him proving his power over his father, who sees himself as like the healer of the people of the circus. It's another way of Artie proving to his father that he isn't everything he makes himself out to be, and his father just falls in line. Ollie kind of interjects and says that years after this doctor, Dr. Phyllis, came to work for them, she had found this article detailing Dr. Phyllis as a 22-year-old med student cutting open her own abdomen, performing abdominal surgery on herself to take out what she believed was a bug that had been implanted inside of her. And she did a great job. Like, it was a successful surgery. She just got tired at the end of it, and so had to call the hospital to come and stitch her up, and that's why it made the news. But they say, like, she's a fantastic student. And that, of course, there was no implanted device found inside her by herself or by the doctors at the hospital. Then we get this intense whirlwind situation where everybody has something going on and also has no idea what's going on, and Ollie is right in the middle of it all. So first, there's a sick horse. There's something wrong with this horse's legs, and Artie wants something done to or with the horse, but the doctor says, I'm not a veterinarian. And Ollie offers her Chick to study in exchange for doing what he wants her to do with the horse. And Ollie is afraid because Dr. Phyllis has been very closed off, hasn't let anyone into her trailer. Nobody really knows anything about her at this point, and Ollie doesn't know what she's doing to Chick. Then the twins are missing, and their mom Lily is panicking. Then there's a sandstorm that causes absolute fucking chaos throughout this circus. It's like knocking over trailers and tents. People are getting sand in their mouths. They can't breathe. They can't see. Everything does end up okay. And Chick, once everything is cleared, tells Ollie that Dr. P is helping him learn how to heal things or to stop things from hurting. Chick and Dr. Phyllis together heal this horse by cutting off half of its legs. Dr. Phyllis tells Chick about the brain and how the brain works, and Chick manages to like stop the pain response from going off in this horse. This part ends with Artie just becoming more and more powerful, masterminding everything, getting so much more income, so many more customers, and also at the same time pulling more and more away from the family. Then we go to part 3, which is back with Ollie as a 38-year-old. Ollie has been researching Miss Lick, the woman who wants to pay Miranda to cut her tail off. Miss Lick is the only heiress to a microwave meal company's fortune, and she also likes swimming. So Ollie starts swimming at the same pool, and they become friends very quickly because Miss Lick is a desperately lonely woman. Miss Lick, Mary Lick, invites Ollie over and shows her the hobby that she has, which began with a classmate in high school having this experience where she was burned almost to death and was no longer like the popular, beautiful girl, and instead like focused on her studies and said that it was the best thing that ever happened to her to be disfigured in this way because she like no longer had to cater to male desires and could focus on herself instead. While telling this story, Miss Lick brings up the Arcturans. So freaky. And says that what the Arcturans did is how she knew what to do with her big feelings about this classmate, which is to disfigure women in exchange for large sums so that they could be liberated from male desire. Now, Ollie's intention here is to befriend Miss Lick so that she can get at her money, so that she can no longer afford to pay for Miranda's treatment or removal of her tail. She is way too rich for Ollie to ever be able to do that, like factories across the country. So instead, Ollie settles for killing her. And while thinking about her plan to kill Miss Lick, Ollie is also thinking about how Artie became a killer and how that must have felt for him. And that is the point that I have read up to so far. I have so many thoughts and so many feelings on this book, and I'm so excited to see where it goes. It's taking me quite a while to read it because I'm kind of like reveling in its deliciousness. I think that the writing is so good, and I have never met characters more well developed than the characters in this book, and I just want to see what they do, and I want to know more about them, and I'm loving it. I'm going to finish reading this, and then I'll update you, and we'll talk about it. I'll see you then. Last I left you off, we were in the present day with Ollie, and it immediately goes back to her childhood, and we meet this character, McGurk, which is scary, because McGurk at this time is 60 years old, and Ollie is like 13, 14, around there. And in the present day, Ollie is going by the last name McGurk. And at this point, we don't know who the father of Miranda is. Frightening. McGurk thinks of himself as like a creator, visionary kind of guy, sort of in the same way that their father, Al, thinks of himself, but McGurk is an electrician, and he's come to talk to Artie to sell him a creation that he has made. A self-masturbator for Artie. McGurk says that he was inspired to do this because of his own disability, which is that he's missing both of his legs from the knees down. Artie says, I don't want this. You have come here to sell this to me on the premise, on this idea that women don't want me. But the girls love me. The ladies are knocking down my door day and night, and that's because, unlike you, I don't have shame about who I am. But Artie does hire Gurk on as an electrician, and together they create this audio setup in Artie's tent that causes people to fall even more under his control during his act. Now, Ollie, when she heard Artie say that the ladies love him desperately, got a little bit jealous, but kind of thought, well, he's probably just joking. I've never actually seen him with any women. Then one day she sees someone going into his trailer, and she runs over and she bites this person on the ass, and realizes that this is a woman that Artie has invited back. And she, for days, is stricken with jealousy because Ollie thinks that she's going to marry Artie one day. She is in love with him in this very interesting way where it's like not quite incestuous, but also it is inarguably incestuous. Ollie is just very much under Artie's finger, and she thinks that her worth comes from how pleased Artie is with her in any moment. So of course she thinks, this is who I'm going to end up with, and that will mean that I have value. When she realizes that it's a different woman coming to Artie's trailer every single night, she is so relieved because she thinks a love affair would push her out, but him just like fucking around with people, that's fine. That actually can bring them closer together because Ollie's the only one who knows about this, and she can like gain more trust from Artie by not telling anyone. So Artie and McGurk have created this audio setup in the tent, and Artie is just bringing in bigger audiences every single night, and they're all under his control. One day, this woman, Alma, this lonely, desperate woman, comes to a show, and Artie hones in on her because he can see people's pain and he can see exactly how to take advantage of their emotions. And he's talking to her, he's going off on this spiel about how she believes that not being fat anymore would solve all of her issues, but that she's actually just looking for validation outside of herself. And he's like, look at me. I love myself. I'm great. I'm accepted. I'm awesome. You all love me. It's more than how your body looks. And he says to her, what do you want? And he's surprised when she says, I want to be like you. And she comes back the next night after Artie has promised her that if she comes back, he can help make her like him. That next day, Ollie sees this woman, Alma, in the bleachers of Artie's tent hours before his show starts, and she sits down, and this woman tells her about this prison pen pal that she has. This man that over the years she has fallen in love with and is set to marry, but he's never seen her in person. The photos that she sent of herself were of a cheerleader at her high school. She had moved to this town where the carnival is currently at. That's basically just a prison with a very small town with no support system, knowing no one, just so that she could send him fresh cakes and cookies. So seeing Artie so accepted and revered has obviously struck a chord with her. Dr. P and Chick, together, slowly remove her limbs. Artie wants it to be a very, very slow process so that she can opt out at any time and so that she's always making a conscious decision to do it. They start with her toes, and she just keeps saying, I need more gone, I need more gone. I feel like I'm actually becoming myself the more of me that you remove. Alma worships Artie, and then she herself becomes a prophet. And this starts the Arturans, a cult of people, all with this secret pain that Artie knows how to take advantage of, and with the desire for somewhere to go where they can be accepted. And they all slowly have their limbs removed. Newspapers across the country pick up on this, and a journalist comes to follow along behind the caravan with all of Artie's followers. This is Norval. He is the man who ended up finding that article about Dr. P, where she had done abdominal surgery on herself. And we get all of Norval's notes and journals following this carnival, and it's crazy to see this family from an outsider's perspective. I absolutely loved it. Norval describes Artie as being in complete control, a total and utter manipulator, a skilled speaker with a sharp awareness of personal problems in others and knowledge of how to take advantage. He's enormously self-centered, proud, vain, and convincing. You're with him and you think, yes, Artie is special, and therefore he cannot be judged by normal standards. And then he elevates you to his level, and you think, yes, I am special, and I also cannot be judged by normal standards. For the rest of these childhood scenes, we every so often get these little interjections of notes from Norval, and they are always endlessly interesting. And also, it's a very distinct shift in voice without being corny. It feels really believable as a journalistic voice, and it's so, I can't emphasize how fascinating it is to see this family from a different lens. One day, Chick comes into Artie's trailer, and he tells Artie and Ollie, there's a man here that I don't like, and he wants to talk to you. He's lost his face, and he can only write notes to communicate. They let this man in, even though Chick really doesn't want them to, because he just has a bad feeling about it. And the first note that he writes is, it's good to see you again. I shot you in a parking lot 10 years ago. Oh my God. Hello? This is Vern, and we get Vern's story. He went to jail, and then he was sentenced to a stay in the hospital for a couple of years. Here, he had tried not to think about what he had done to these children, but it was also hard to feel guilty about it because everyone was telling him that he had done the right thing. Then he becomes convinced that if he lets his own children, who he's no longer allowed to see, stay with their mother and be raised by her, that they are going to become like the children that he tried to kill. And so he kidnaps them. He takes them to Disneyland, he takes them to the Grand Canyon, and then he sees a poster of Artie. And it all comes rushing back, like the feeling that he had that this is how his children are going to end up. So he takes them back to their mother's house, and he shoots her with a gun, and then tries to shoot himself, but he's a lousy fucking shot, as we learned in the parking lot, and he shoots off almost his entire face. Vern is here to ask to work for them, and Artie accepts. Ollie says that this makes perfect sense to her, that it makes perfect sense to fail to kill someone and then turn around and start worshiping them. Though the two don't tell anyone else who this man is. We get a little interjection of notes from Norval. He's talking about the cult and how big it has blown up to be. Their slogan is peace, isolation, and purity. They are selling a life to these people, a very permanent change. Of course, like any cult, they require a dowry, and they do require conscious decision-making, which is different from a lot of cults. There have been 750 people who have gone all out, had every single digit removed, then the legs to the knees, the legs to the thighs, then the arms to the elbows, and the arms to the shoulders. They're all living in care homes across the country, Arturan care homes. That's over 3 years. There's also 5,000 people following the carnival who have had at least all 10 of their digits removed. So Artie is suspicious of the twins. They've been pulling good numbers with their act, and he doesn't know that they have been doing sex work. So in his suspicion, he sets Vern, who they call the bag man because he has a bag covering his face, like collecting his drool, and like it's basically just exposed flesh on his head. Vern is set as the twins' guard, which drives them nuts because of Artie like displaying his power over them, but also because Vern is so persistent and devoted. So of course Vern catches them in the act, and this absolutely enrages Artie, who sees it as this major betrayal. And to punish the twins, he gives them to Vern in like an arranged marriage. And because this is Artie's will, no one pushes back against this. Ollie tries to get him to go talk to the twins, but all he says is tell the twins that this guy's probably dangerous and they shouldn't fight back against him. Now, Ollie herself is thrilled that she no longer has to fight the twins for Artie's attention, but she does give in a little, and she brings them a gun to use in case something goes wrong. They almost use that gun to kill him, but instead of just barging into their trailer, he knocks softly on the door, and that makes Ellie kind of like lose steam with this, and instead they start having sex. But their mother has seen him go in and realized that she knows him from somewhere. She puts a finger on this familiarity with Vern, and she's like, that's the guy who tried to kill my fucking children. So she comes into the room while they're having sex, and she shoots him dead. The twins, however, are pregnant. Dr. P won't abort the fetus because she knows that Artie doesn't want that. So the twins run away. They escape. They get to a doctor, and they're caught right before this doctor can perform the abortion. And when they get home, they are locked in their trailer, imprisoned. Artie wants to separate the twins, but Ollie doesn't understand this, and she thinks that when Artie talks about the procedure, he's talking about an abortion. He's changed his mind. Now, only Artie and Ollie have been allowed in the twins' trailer by Artie, and Ollie doesn't really understand why she's seen as a stand-in for Artie by the captive twins who won't engage with her at all. But then at the same time, right before the procedure, she is the one who drugs both their milks and her parents' nightly cocos. The procedure is not a classic separation because that's impossible with the way that they're built. What it is a lobotomy of Ellie. This is absolutely devastating to see Iffy have her sister gone, but still attached to her, all while going through these crazy changes with the pregnancy. Dr. P is really excited about this lobotomy. She's always hated the really tedious small surgeries that she has to do to the followers of Artie's cult, so she creates a lobotomy schism. Artie's not worried about it though, because he has had her train her own replacement, and he gets that replacement to lobotomize her. Chick. Now Chick is the new surgeon. In Ollie's world, she is kind of seeing this boy, Pinboy, in the carnival, but she realizes with him that her love isn't like the love of other women, and that he will never love her in the same way that she loves him. And so she decides that she's going to remain devoted to Artie. And to do so, she asks Chick to impregnate her with Artie's sperm, which he successfully does without Artie's knowledge and without Ollie feeling anything at all. Then the twins' baby, Mumpo, is born. He is 26 pounds out of the womb. And this baby is a cavernous void. His need is endless, and he's slowly killing the twins with it. Artie learns that Ollie is pregnant, but not that it's with his child. He thinks that it's with the boy that she was seeing before. And he is beyond infuriated. He is so angry. He doles out the punishment that is the worst for Ollie, which is that she can no longer serve him. He doesn't want anything to do with her. He thinks that she is a traitor. Ollie's devastated, but also secretly deep down, she's thrilled at his jealousy. At this point in the book, the family that has been slowly falling apart is now very quickly falling apart, and the tension is building to a point that it's near suffocating to read. And it's in this moment that baby Miranda is born. Ollie loves this baby. She's desperately anxious that this baby is going to be hurt by the world around her, so she spends all of her time with Chick, who is also the surgeon, doing like 15-hour shifts because she knows that Chick can keep anyone safe. As soon as Miranda is born with just this lowly little tail, Ollie knows that Artie will despise her because she doesn't fit into that very, very tight, very perfect little zone of being a freak enough to make money and fit in with everyone else, but also not too much that it would threaten Artie. Despite her love for this baby, when Artie asks her to get rid of the baby, she does it. And she addresses Miranda here. She says, Artie could have killed you. Artie could have done worse. Basically, he was all right for it. And actually, you should thank him for making me abandon you with the nuns. Probably the hardest thing that Ollie has ever had to do, but that she thinks is totally worth it and justified for Artie's not even affection, validation, I guess. Then it happens. They lose it all. It starts with Ellie, who has been slowly coming back to herself but hiding it from everyone, killing Mumpo, the baby. Then Iffy kills Ellie, and in turn herself. They are conjoined twins. In this moment where they find Iffy having just finished killing Ellie and Mumpo's body on the floor, it is so brutal to see the weight of Chick's responsibility as a 13-year-old trying and failing to save his family. When Chick realizes that all three of them are dead, he runs as fast as he can out of the trailer and towards Artie's tent. And he stands there, and in this explosion of rage and injustice, he actually does literally explode the entire carnival in this firestorm. The survivors are basically just Ollie and her mother. And Ollie says as she watches the entire thing blow up, she's doing it with an enormous sense of relief. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God, Katherine Dunn is trying to kill me. So now the past meets up with the future. Ollie and Miss Lick have become pretty good friends, like maybe Ollie's only friend ever. Though Miss Lick is kind of overbearing and difficult, she also does clearly care about Ollie, and Ollie cares about her. But Ollie has to follow through with her plan because she cannot allow Miss Lick to remove Miranda's tail. And obviously, the life that Ollie's had, she's not going to just like communicate about that. So she attempts to kill Miss Lick through this very convoluted plan to create like a mustard gas in the foot bath before Miss Lick gets into the swimming pool. But she kind of chickens out, and she opens the door with a gun and then shoots Miss Lick and shoots herself. And that is the end of the book. Both of them are dead. The very last thing that we see is this letter that Miranda receives from Ollie, kind of explaining everything, telling her where to get all of the materials to believe the claim that Ollie is her mother, and to where to get this transcript so that she can know her family's story. This is sent, obviously, after Ollie's death, so we don't really know who sent it, or whether or not it was always Ollie's plan to kill herself, which I think is the intended interpretation. So I thought this book was absolutely beyond fantastic. I can't remember the last time I was so thoroughly pulled into a story. I felt like I was living my life in a haze for the entire time I was reading this book. I was like coming up for breaths of air and then going back to my real life, which was the world of geek love. This book is so evocative and insightful and perceptive and emotionally intelligent. It's very human in its portrayal of these family dynamics marred by ambition and by this like twisted, warped loyalty. It shows this very specific kind of love that is not a beautiful love and is so obviously well understood by Dunn and so perfectly translated into book form. Never have I read a book with such well-developed, unique characters that felt so vivid to me. These were real people. That's what sucked me in. They were real people with feelings and thoughts and like nuanced complexities. Who they were and their dynamics made so much sense to me, and then it was fascinating to see them living in this very dark and almost kind of fantastical world that the book allows you to buy into because the writing is so good. The prose is specific and deliberate and smart. It's a little bit dense in the beginning before you really like got into this book, and if you read this book, if you push through that density in the beginning, you will get into it. But that density is also worth it. It becomes very rewarding in the end. I liked that this book took me longer to read than I expected it to. I think that something about it just like kind of not drags on, because it's in a great way. It's what you want. You want this book to be longer, and it's great that reading 10 pages takes you a little bit longer than reading 10 pages of a different book. I think both the writing and your own brain forces you to savor it. It was a very interesting and empathetic portrayal of disability, a nuanced exploration of acceptance. I think that Katherine Dunn very obviously well understood the disabled body as a spectacle and like the abled response, and then the disabled response to that abled response. At one point, Artie says, "We have this advantage that the norms expect us to be wise. Freaks are like owls, mythed into blinking, bloodless objectivity. The norms figure our contact with their brand of life is shaky. They see us as cut off from temptation and pettiness. Even our hate is grand by their feeble lights. And the more deformed we are, the higher our supposed sanctity." There are so many little morsels like that, specifically from Artie, the most insane character I've ever read about, and also felt so fucking real, that just make you think, and will make me think forever. I will never ever forget this book and what it was saying. It so thoughtfully flipped notions of normality on their head and forced you to interrogate them. Don't get me wrong, I did think that this was very dark and strange and disturbing, but it wasn't quite as like totally avoid this at all costs if you're squeamish as I thought it would be based on what I've seen people say about it. I think this is very, very literary. I don't think this is a piece of horror fiction. I had always wanted to pick this for the book club, but I thought, no, people say this is transgressive. People say it's too dark. This is too heavy to read for the book club. I think this is a fantastic book club pick, and I'm pissed that I haven't picked it, and instead I'm picking shit like The Simple Art of Killing a Woman or Scrap by Calla Henkel. We just read that this month. Oh my god, it sucks so hard. I think what I'm trying to say is that this book is never disturbing or dark just for the sake of it, and it's never disturbing or dark in a way that doesn't serve the narrative. This was devastating. It was raw and honest. It was enthralling. It was empathetic, beautiful and horrible at the same time. Virtually a perfect read. I think that part of me will always live in the world of geek love. This was truly an unforgettable experience, and I cannot recommend this book to you enough. Please go read this. I read somewhere that this book is so well loved that since 1989 when it was published, it has never gone out of print. So you should be able to find it. And if you can, get your hands on it and go fucking read this. Okay, next up, I'm reading The Sluts by Dennis Cooper, and I'll get back to you to talk to you about it. I'll see you then. Bye. Hello. Today I'm here to talk to you about this Dennis Cooper book. I want to give a very brief trigger warning for absolutely everything under the sun. If you can think of it, it's probably in this book. I won't be going into like great detail here, but it is a part of the book, and I think you need to know that before you watch this recap. So this book is kind of epistolary in the sense that it all takes place over messaging boards where gay men review escorts. It begins with a thread on the escort Brad, who is a very, very young-looking man who's obviously struggling with both mental illness and drug use. Reviewers talk about how Brad is really good for sadists because he will allow clients to do basically whatever they want to him, to treat him in any kind of way. But also reviewers warn that potential clients should be wary because Brad can become very disoriented, and people here are split on whether or not it's worth it because they can live out their fantasies with him, but also because he can be frightening and difficult to reason with. These reviews kind of keep ramping up with the violence that's being enacted onto Brad and detailed in the reviews. Then there's a review from a man who claims that he was worried about Brad, so met up with him to try to arrange some social housing and some rehabilitation treatment for him. Brad replies to this and says, "This guy's lying, he's a prick, he's trying to make himself out to be an angel, but he really just wants me for sex." Then another reviewer tells a story of this hotel meetup with Brad. When Brad gets there, he's devastated that there's not any alcohol, and then the reviewer says that he starts having sex with Brad, who's like pretty agitated, as like a safety precaution, and it's clear he's convincing himself that this is the case. When they're done, Brad starts screaming accusations about assault and then gets kicked out of the hotel. Then we get a review from Brian, who's going to be a major player throughout this book. He says that reading the reviews of Brad, he was worried about Brad's mental state because both of his parents died of cancer, and he saw evidence of a brain tumor in Brad's behavior, so he met up with him and took him to go get tested. He says Brad has a couple of months to live. He has a terminal brain tumor. He also says, "I'm not an angel, I'm not a savior, I'm not a good Samaritan. I am interested in Brad because I have a fantasy of killing a young man, a young boy." People are talking about Brad as though he's probably 16 and has a fake ID that says he's 18. Brian wants to kill him during sex. So Brian has invited Brad into his home to stay there and to basically pimp him out. He's allowing him to escort until he's incapacitated enough that Brian will be putting him out of his misery by killing him. Then there's some reviews of people who have hired Brad through Brian, who again is clearly his pimp, and like speaking for him, commenting on these reviews. Then we get a review from an escort acquaintance of Brad's named Stevie, who's also like an amateur porn star, and Stevie says that Brad is a con artist. Brian responds antagonistically, and he's like, "Stevie, I thought you were like incapacitated from AIDS." Stevie says, "I did get really sick, but I'm a little bit better now, but I know that this guy who's saying he's Brad is actually a man named Kevin, who I worked with at an escort agency, Boys Next Door." Then Boys Next Door posts an advertisement that also says, "We posted a photo of Brad/Kevin on our website. Go and check it out to see if he matches up with the descriptions of the Brad in these reviews." Then there's a review from a really scary man. A lot of these men are incredibly scary, and this man is reviewing Brad after some non-consensual BDSM torture that he inflicts onto Brad. And he says, "I looked at the Boys Next Door website, and that's not the Brad that I saw. That's a different guy." There is a lot of back and forth in this book about what is the truth. And you have really absolutely no idea what to believe. And that is kind of the nature of the internet. And it is deliberate for sure. It's also a little bit tiring because there are stretches of this book where it is just over and over again, this is the truth, and then someone commenting and saying, no, it's not. And then this is the truth, and then someone commenting and saying, no, it's not. None of the people posting on this site will ever strike you as inherently reliable narrators, and they all have ulterior motives that are pretty obvious to you as the reader. Then we get another review from that guy who tortured Brad, talking about how he went over for a second meetup and Brad had been beaten almost to death by Brian, who chickened out of killing him at the last moment. Then a reviewer who goes by the screen name Secret Lifer meets up with Brad, and they agree for him to kill Brad. Brad phones Brian to get Brian's permission, though it's very clear to the other person, Secret Lifer, that this isn't a real phone call. It seems, though, that Brad believes that it is a real phone call. This Secret Lifer guy tortures Brad until he's almost dead, and then he, too, chickens out. And Brad, as he's writing this, is in the other room screaming, begging to be killed. A lot of things happen in this book, and there's a lot of people in this book, and so I might be making two people out of one. Secret Lifer and the torture guy might be the same person, but I don't think it's all that important. I just want to say that because I might be getting that wrong. Then Brian comes in and he says, Brad is missing and I'm offering a reward for anyone who has any information on his whereabouts. Then we get a note from the webmaster. Now the webmaster is kind of meant to be this authority figure, but he's not. Like, he knows nothing. Everyone is so anonymous. You can't take anything the webmaster says at face value. But he says there's evidence that Stevie, that escort friend that Brad had, is the one writing all of these reviews, and also is Brian. Then another escort, Corey, comes to clear the air. He says weeks ago he was hired to do a scene with another escort named Brad, but when he got there, he recognized this guy as Stevie, masquerading as a boy named Brad. Stevie was in bad shape health-wise with the progression of his AIDS, and he wasn't going to live for much longer, and he was looking for someone to kill him in a snuff video. He says that he had taken on the name of Brad so that he could find Brian and get Brian, who's a guy who wants to kill somebody, to kill him. He also said that he got the idea for this snuff video thing from this guy that he used to work with at this agency named Kevin, who was killed in a snuff video. Stevie invites this escort, Corey, over to see the snuff video of Kevin, and Corey is going to do it. Then the reviewer, Secret Lifer, says, Brad is dead. I hired another escort, Ren, to help me finish him off. Then Ren comes in. Ren says, that's not true at all. I was hired to do a scene with Brian and Brad. Brad had some marks on him, but he was nowhere near death like Secret Lifer is describing. The webmaster says Ren seems to be truthful. He's just decided this. And again, he's supposed to be an authority figure. He also says prior reports of Stevie's masterminding of writing all of these reviews are false. Stevie then starts advertising himself as a young man who is on the brink of death and therefore more easily taken advantage of by clients. A little while later, the webmaster says that Stevie has been found murdered. Then a man who runs a construction business in Oregon, everything has been taking place in LA and San Diego up until this point, he posts and he says that a young man works for him named Brad, who fits the description that everyone has given of Brad, of being someone who has these nervous tics. Some people have ascribed this to mental illness, some people have said this is because he got hit on the head as a baby, and some people said it's because of drug use, and some people said it's because he has a brain tumor. Brad had quit working for him that morning after the guy had brought to Brad's attention what people are saying about him on this website. Brad admitted that he used to be gay, but he's out of that life now. Now he has a girlfriend, and she's pregnant, and he's trying not to get back into escorting. He also tells the construction worker that the first few reviews of him in the thread are true, but that almost everything else is made up. He says that Brian was his sugar daddy and that their relationship ended when he was having a three-way with Brian and Ren, and Brian tried to encourage Ren to kill him and then tried to kill Brad himself, and Brad escaped. Then we get a review from Corey, who went to watch that snuff video at Stevie's place. When he got there, he ran into Brian, who said Stevie's body is in the other room. Brian threatened Corey with a gun and then decided to let him go free for some reason. He seemed very erratic. Then Brian comes to tell the truth, as much as there could be a truth in this situation. He says that he had hired Brad as an escort and then offered to financially support him and house him, and that they decided to come up with this dying escort thing to advertise online to like spice up their sex life. Both of them have fantasies, Brad of being killed during sex and Brian of killing someone during sex. Brad specifically liked to imagine himself as being very ill while having sex with men. Brian says Brad was a liar and a narcissist, and all he ever wanted was to be desired by other people. That they had had this situation with Ren where Brian had encouraged Ren to kill Brad, and when he saw Brad on the brink of death, something in him snapped, and he realized that he was going to be the one to do it. So he stopped Ren, and then a couple days later, he just about killed Brad, but Brad managed to escape. Brian says he saw that review from the construction worker, and he was like, this is definitely Brad, having run off to Oregon and now pretending to be the innocent straight boy. Then the webmaster comes in, and he says Corey has a warrant out for his arrest for the murder of Stevie. Then we get an update from the construction business guy. He says that Brad had called him crying, saying that his girlfriend had kicked him out, and he was asking for a place to stay. But when he got to the construction worker's house, they got into a big fight because Brad was really fucked up. He was screaming accusations at this guy, and then he ran off and he burnt down this guy's business and has now been arrested. Then we switch formatting off of this reviews and then comments on reviews format that it has been throughout the book, and it's now ads and voicemails. This seems to be implied to be Brian, and Brian is maybe meeting up with men and killing them during sex. This is absolutely the most disturbing and disgusting part of this book. It's also like not all that relevant plot-wise, though I think it is a necessary component. This shows a whole bunch of different encounters with maybe Brian, maybe just Box 157, trying to find the most vulnerable people that he can to kill during sex. There's also an interpretation that I think is very valid, that he is finding vulnerable people to infect with HIV during sex. It's really sickening, really, really horrible. It kind of reminds me of Bret Easton Ellis in the way that the dialogue is written. I think that this part of the book is the most like horror adjacent part of the book. I think here you also get to see this very cold, calculated, sinister man become more and more desperate, which is incredibly creepy. Then the format switches to message boards instead of what it has been, which has been the series of reviews. That's more like big chunks of story and then a couple of comments. This is a lot of back and forth between the people on this website. The construction worker updates saying that he has met with Brad's girlfriend, Elaine, who is a much older woman than him. Elaine has said that Brad has some serious mental issues, and when he's unmedicated, he fixates on older men. And she begged him to ask the judge for leniency, to ask the judge to put Brad in the hospital instead of jail. Elaine then posts, offering to forward any questions people on the website, because this has become so sensational, have for Brad in exchange for $100. The construction worker says she has no access to Brad by email, that she's scamming them. Elaine then exposes this construction guy for hiring Brad under the pretense of working for this business, but actually taking him home every day and having sex with him and promising to pay him and then not paying him, which is actually the real reason that Brad burnt down his business. Then he comes in to defend his honor, saying that Elaine is a well-known pimp in the Oregon area who takes advantage of vulnerable young men and that he was actually just saving Brad from her. Then someone called the Gay Journalist comes in to update on an article that he's writing about Stevie's murder. He says that Corey has been arrested, but he'll claim that Brian hired him to kill Stevie. This gay journalist is trying to follow up on some leads, and he's looking to get into contact with Brian. Someone comes in and says that he saw the snuff film of Stevie's death and that it was brutal and awful and made him vomit. Someone else comes in and says that Brad offered to be killed in exchange for $50,000 to go to his unborn child. Then Jimmy, Elaine's friend, comes in, and he says this whole emailing with Brad thing has been a scam, that it's actually been him and some of Elaine's other friends pretending to be Brad. Then he offers Brian something that he knows Brian will want. Elaine says, nobody take Jimmy up on this offer. What he's offering Brian is a 13-year-old boy that he's stolen off of the street and run away with. Then probably Brian, someone who's heavily implying that they're Brian, comes in and says, I took care of Jimmy, he's dead, I have the boy. There's a lot of back and forth throughout all this from the observers on these message boards who are questioning whether or not this is true or just someone living out a fantasy. Brian comes in, he says, it is all true, and the reason that I sound different and you all are questioning whether or not I'm the real Brian is because I've changed. Brad broke my heart, and now I'm a cold-blooded psychopath because he wouldn't let me kill him. Then the fucking gay journalist comes back in. He starts theorizing about Brian and Stevie being the same person and the Portland Brad being different from the LA Brad. Brian then admits that he and Corey planned to snuff Stevie together, and then Corey started implicating him in the crime online because he got cold feet and he's an idiot, but he was really the one who did the crime. Now Jimmy comes back, and Jimmy says, Brian didn't kill me. I never had a little boy. I was just planning on robbing him. You're all a bunch of liars in this thread. Then someone else points out that there has been no news anywhere of any of the stuff that the gay journalist is talking about with all these crimes he's writing an article on. They say, in this sensationalized news media culture that we live in, do we really think that this would just fly under the radar? People love dead gay men. dead gay men that they think deserved to die. The webmaster comes in and he says, I'm shutting this shit down. This message board has just become too crazy. We're going too off the rails, and the police are going to come and shut this down if I don't do it. So you all have like 24 hours, and then we're done. A friend of Elaine comes in, confirms that Brad has been released early from prison, is living with Elaine, and that him and Elaine got together after she took him off the street, and that he's 16 years old and she's like 30. Then the gay journalist is exposed as not being a journalist, as being another escort, Zach Young. His ex-boyfriend comes in and says, this is definitely Zach. When we were together, Zach was obsessed with this Brian Brad thing on the website. Then an account called The Real Brian comes in and says, everything that has been in this discussion board has been bullshit. I don't know Corey. I don't know Stevie. I didn't kill Stevie. And Brad is living with Elaine, and we're not in contact with each other. The gay journalist ends the forum by admitting that he is Zach Young. He's not a journalist, and that he's been posting as Brian and also as lots of other people, masterminding this in the same way that Stevie was accused of doing, because he wanted to get a way to contact Brad. And he says, soon Brad will be back on the streets as an escort, thanks to me. Then it switches to emails between Brad and Brian on just Brad's side. Brad says, it was nice to get that email from you, Brian. I'm sorry I hurt you. I've changed. Please buy me a bus ticket to come to LA and I'll let you kill me. And then it's like, I'm sorry, I fucked up. I didn't come down. Please just send more money. I really will come this time, I promise. He's obviously very unwell and also very manipulative. There's a lot of back and forth, but we only see the one side still. He tells Brian, book another ticket, but book it for Thaddeus Stroh. That's my fake ID. He says, Brian, I don't know why you keep talking about how you look different. I don't care if you look different. I'll do anything for you. I'll do anything that you want. Then he says, why'd you send that guy to come and check and see if I was the real Brad? Then he sends another email and he says, okay, I get it. You're not actually Brian. You're Zach. I know I told you that I loved you when I thought you were Brian. I don't really love Brian. I just tell people what they want to hear. I'll do the same for you. I don't care who you are. Just buy me a bus ticket. Let me get down to LA. House me, financially support me. You can do whatever you want to me. And then we switch back to the original format of reviews. The first review is from someone who's reviewing Brad before Brad is like actually publicly out there as an escort. This reviewer says that Brad is managed by Brian, Zach, and that the entire time he was there, Brad kept on his long sleeve shirt but was naked otherwise. Obvious drug abuse happening. But also, he no longer has his famous tics, as he says thanks to a new medication that he's on. Then reviews of Brad start trickling in. Brian, the shifty pimp, both of them very drugged out, these outrageous prices. Someone goes over just to question Brad, but we don't really learn anything that we didn't already know, other than that he's on medication for a nervous disorder that causes the tics. Which we did know, actually. I literally just said that. This reviewer says, it seems like this is not the same Brad as everyone was reviewing in the beginning. Two of the people who did review Brad in the beginning say that they were going to try to raise up money to go and see Brad again to see if it is the same Brad. There is a lot of morbid curiosity going on here. Even though we're not in the message boards anymore, you can feel that there are a lot of people reading these reviews, which is crazy to accomplish, I think. Then we get a review from a man who has a fetish for breaking young boys' legs during sex, which he brutally details doing to Brad. And then at the end of his review, at the end of all the reviews, it asks you to describe yourself. And he says he's a fucking high school teacher. Oh, God. The next reviewer sneaks in a tiny camera and manages to capture a photo of Brad and post it. Then there's a flood of comments saying this is not the same Brad that I saw in the beginning of this story. Then the webmaster comes in. He says that Corey pled guilty to the murder of Stevie in exchange for not being charged for like 5 other murders of young gay male escorts in the LA area, including Kevin. Do you remember Kevin? We're like 100,000 people past Kevin. Then there's a review who talks about recognizing Brad from an amateur porn video. Commenting on this review is the producer of that porn video who says, this isn't Brad, this is Thad, which, like, come on. Like, come on. That was ridiculous. That got a bit of an eye roll from me. It's Thad. Do you remember his fake ID, Thaddeus Stroh? I just think it's stupid to do Brad and Thad. Come on. This guy says he's got a lot of interest in the Brad porn video. He's going to try to make some more copies of it, and he's selling them, again, outrageous prices. This is such a sensation on this website. Brian, his email to contact to hire Brad is meetalegend@gmail.com. Then we get the worst review in the book, the most detailed, violent review. This is from a doctor. This doctor speaks in a very detached, clinical tone, but then at the same time, he's using the word prostrate instead of prostate. So it doesn't feel quite believable. His review details permanently mutilating Brian. He removes his testicles and makes him eat them. And this kicks off just like a maelstrom of abuse towards Brian that is obviously going to end in his murder. There's a date set for his murder. People start claiming body parts before his final end date. His face is beaten beyond recognition. His arms are set to be amputated. The rest of his genitals are removed. Then fucking Jimmy comes in, and Jimmy starts threatening to blackmail Brian or Zach. Zach comes in and says he's gonna spread lies about Brad, but don't listen to him. Then the construction guy comes in and he says, I literally just talked to Brad on the phone, and he's like trying to live his best life in Portland with his wife and his new baby. Then the Brad who lives in Oregon himself comes in and he says, none of these reviews have been about me, but you all seem to already know that. The only true ones were the first few in the very beginning, but this is obviously someone else pretending to be me. Brad says that one of his friends was using an old email of his, and he received an email intended for Brad from Brian. Brad said, do whatever you want with it, and he passed that email on to Thad, who was trying to just scam some money out of Brian. Again, Brian is Zach is the gay journalist. Then Zach comes in and he admits that no, this isn't Brad. This is some guy named Thad who kind of looks like him, who was a street hustler, who was using drugs to self-medicate his depression, tried to scam some money, ended up coming to LA. Zach says, I was scammed too. I was trying to hide this from everyone because I thought that it was better for everyone to think that this was the real Brad. Then the original Brian comes in and he says, none of this is about me. I have a new, young, fuck-up boyfriend. And it's just like shitty to think of the cycle of abuse just continuing and continuing. Then we get a final review, which compared to everything else that has been so incredibly detailed is disturbingly to the point. This describes the reviewer shooting Brad or Thad and then also shooting Brian or Zach. The webmaster says that Zach Young's body was found, but there was no evidence of anyone else being there, and it was ruled a suicide. The final message in this book is from Zach to the webmaster. Zach says the first 6 reviews in this second round of reviews were true, up until someone took a photo of Brad, like the breaking legs was true, and then Brad escaped. Zach says that he created everything else from that point to try to come up with a better story for everyone, a more satisfying story. So it's kind of asking us what it means about Zach specifically that he could imagine these horrific scenes and then detail them and portray them as the truth. But I think the bigger questions in this book are about violence in the gay community, about violence external to the community that is enacted upon gay men, and then themselves turning that violence towards each other or reveling in it or fantasizing about it. I also think, though this book is so detailed in its violence and gore and horrificness, it's more about how sensationalized this violence becomes on the website than it is about the violence itself. I'm sure others have the complaint about this book that it's transgressive just for the sake of being transgressive. I can see that, but I think I understand what Cooper was doing with the intensity of violence in this book. I do, however, think that it was confusing for the sake of being confusing at points. Like I already said, I found it really exhausting in the first half of the book when it's a lot of like, this is true, this is false, this is true, this is false. I thought this was some really well done commentary on how exploitation manifests in the internet age. I felt like I learned a lot and a lot of interesting things about like the politics and nuances and motivations around like these violent fetishes, specifically spreading HIV during sex. I think when you're reading this book, you can pretty easily be like, damn, these are some sick fucks. But when you think about it any harder, you can see that they're also coping with violence inside and outside of their community, with dehumanization, with the violence of the AIDS crisis, and with the violence of dying of AIDS and that like slow, horrible death. A lot of what's happening here, truth or fantasy, involves taking power back. That's why I think I can see what Cooper is doing with the transgression in this book, because it is one of the worst books in terms of violence and gore that I've ever read, but it is doing something with it. It's also doing something in the sense that it almost feels desensitizing because it's so much. It is so, I can't describe to you how much this book is. I was reading the last quarter of it with a knot in my stomach. It's such extreme graphic violence that some of the lesser stuff, which in a different book would be absolutely horrifying, doesn't really faze you. And I think that that kind of mirrors the experience of the observers on this forum and of what it's like to fall down a terrible internet rabbit hole. There's this unspoken underlying current of violence enacted on all of these men from outside of the community the impact of is very clear, but is never explicitly acknowledged. And I think that that was very well done in this book. I think that it is shining a light on a very small group of people, but generalizing out of it, saying bigger things with that microscope. And the things it's saying, all of the commentary here is really well done, very skilled. It's never preachy, it's never explicit, but it is undeniably there, buried under all of the insanity and violence. The format could have easily felt very gimmicky, being all set on internet forums, but I think that it captured the tone so well that it never was a gimmick to me. It was a literary device. For me, this was one of those books where I finished it and I was kind of like, okay, 3.5 stars, maybe, something like that. And then the more I've been thinking about it, the more I think that it was actually genuinely genius. It's definitely worth reading a second time and reading digitally so you can search through and find everybody's usernames. I just didn't have the patience for that. By virtue of its format, this is a quicker read. Also, for me, I think things that are dark and disturbing are very engrossing, and I found myself sucked into this world. I hesitate to recommend this because, like I've tried to convey, it's so horrific in every single way you could possibly ever think of, and sometimes gratuitously so. But if you're into that, or if you can stomach it, I think that this is worth reading. Damn. Jesus Christ. Some of these scenes will make me nauseous for the next few years to come. That's all I have to say. Thank you for coming along on this journey with me. Thank you for watching. I'm going to go read something light and fluffy. I'll see you later. Bye.